In 1919, the United States federal government banned the sale, production, and transportation of alcohol. By attempting to outlaw drinking, they created the most lucrative black market in American history. Into this massive economic vacuum stepped a 20-year-old from Brooklyn named Alphonse Capone. He arrived in Chicago with little more than a few deep scars across his left cheek and an intense ambition to exploit the new laws. Working under established boss Johnny Toe Elf, Capone quickly proved his ruthless efficiency. When Torrio survived a brutal assassination attempt in 1925 and fled the city, he handed his entire bootlegging network directly to his young enforcer. This chart compares the weekly municipal budget of 1920 Chicago against Capone's illegal revenue. His syndicates across alcohol, gambling, and vice were generating millions of dollars every single week, completely dwarfing the city's own financial resources. Capone extracted that wealth through systematic physical intimidation. If a speakeasy owner refused his liquor, his men destroyed the building. A federal policy designed to purify the morality of the nation had instead constructed a perfectly funded, heavily armed criminal monarchy right in the Midwest. Capone protected his operations by simply buying the local authorities. He put police captains, judges, and mayors on his payroll, neutralizing law enforcement from the inside. When he needed to secure the neighboring suburb of Cicero, his men took over the polling stations by force. They openly fired on voters and election workers to ensure their preferred candidates won the election. Any attempt to prosecute his syndicate failed before a trial could even begin. Witnesses were routinely intimidated into silence, and jury members were bribed, rendering the justice system paralyzed. Capone effectively owned the infrastructure of Chicago's law. Conventional police work became obsolete once the system itself was on the payroll. The only remaining obstacle to his total control of the city was the North Side Gang, led by Bugs Moran. The two factions engaged in a bitter, bloody turf war over the massive expanse of Chicago's illegal markets. On the morning of February 14, 1929, Capone's men executed a chillingly precise ambush at the SMC Cartage Company garage. Disguised in stolen police uniforms, they easily disarmed Moran's men, who assumed it was a standard raid, before turning heavy military-grade weapons on them. 7 men were lined up facing a brick wall. In a 10-second hail of bullets, the fake officers executed them all, leaving their bodies on the freezing floor. The extreme brutality of the massacre made headlines across the country. Capone was elevated from a local nuisance to a national terrorist, prompting President Herbert Hoover to demand direct, immediate federal intervention. The public nature of the execution shifted the political landscape. By moving his violence into the spotlight, Capone had unknowingly invited the full scrutiny of the federal government. Realizing that local homicide charges would never stick, a Treasury agent named Frank Wilson adopted a different strategy. He abandoned the murder investigations entirely and turned to federal tax law. This was the birth of modern forensic accounting. Wilson reasoned that if he could not prove Capone pulled a trigger, he could prove he was running a massive, undeclared, and untaxed business. The street violence and local bribery that protected him from the Chicago police offered absolutely zero protection against the rigid, unemotional mathematics of the federal tax code. In 1931, the most violent man in America stood trial. He was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, entirely for tax evasion. He was eventually transferred to the newly opened federal penitentiary on Alcatraz Island. Stripped of his enforcers and his political influence, he was reduced to a simple designation: Prisoner 85. His final years were defined by rapid physical and mental decay caused by untreated syphilis. He spent his last days staring blankly out a window at his Florida estate, dying quietly in 1947. A man who conquered a major American city with machine guns and millions in extorted cash was defeated by a solitary bureaucrat armed with a pencil. Frank Wilson's asymmetric strategy established a new standard for the justice system. It remains the tactical framework the FBI and IRS use today to dismantle cartels and corrupt syndicates. Empires can hide a smoking gun or intimidate a witness, but they cannot hide the numbers. An audit never misses.